I want to take a look to the future. And so there's a lot of concern amongst developers themselves, as anybody who's writing code, anybody in data science, anybody working on AI, that AI itself could put us all out of a job, that artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence could make a lot of human work obsolete. And I think there's maybe, when people think about that as a concern, things that involve physical manipulation of the world, I think people might feel like that's a little bit safer for a little bit longer, because robotics is hard and it takes time to be able to, physically manipulate the real world. So all kinds of things like, physical therapist, massage therapist, construction work. There's all these kinds of jobs that, seem relatively safe because they involve physical manipulation of the world. But if you're in a purely cognitive kind of role, which I think up until the past few years, it kind of felt like that's where you were safer. Really go to university, get that graduate degree, really develop your specialization, because the machines, they're good at the physical stuff. They're getting better at the physical stuff. We've got robots in factories, but cognitive work, that's safe. And now all of a sudden, since the chat GPT moment that we talked about earlier in this episode, you're like, wow, no, machines are taking, carving out more and more and more of a broader cut out of the possible cognitive tasks that we can do, doing it at a superhuman capability. And yeah, how much does that concern you? How does that, you know, how fearful are you of, the cognitive ability of machines? And yeah, how can people, is there any way that we can prepare as individuals or organizations for that kind of future?
Yeah, um, again, through my role at Cortical and most definitely my role at ODSC, and then for going to these meetups and talking to people, I do think about this to the best of my ability. So there's a lot of ink being spilled on this, a lot of smart people talking about this, but also I got to say a lot of nonsense as well. And maybe I'm speaking nonsense as well, so I don't mean to be speak ill of anybody. But when I do go to meetups and conferences, um, and people are generally concerned, it makes me a little bit pissed off, to say the least, because there's so much angst out there and a lot of like clickbait bait headlines. So part of my role, like your role, is to educate people in data science, and this is why people should listen to this podcast, right? So yeah, preparing for the future, I try and figure that out myself, because how do you deal with anxiety? How do you deal with worry? You try, like most things, it's a big problem. You break it down into smaller problems, right? And I do believe, without having to repeat myself and the stuff we already talked about, I do believe there is a new kind of skills hierarchy out there. Whether you're in an AI data science role or a non-technical role, I do think that's important. And I don't know. I'm trying to flesh this out in my head, because people ask me this all the time, and I want to have a better answer. But I do think number one, from the teaching I've done myself, is think about the first step is, or in the hierarchy or whatever that is. Look, at this stage, ChatGPT, basic prompting, using Gen AI, it's all table stakes, right? That's the price of entry. Everyone should be doing that. And with each of these tiers, you can kind of look at a base tier, and then how do you do more of an expert tier? And so for those of us in the role, we should think of the expert tier as well. So beyond doing that, and like this is why I loved listening to your podcast with Curl, the former host of the Super Data Science podcast. When he explained LLMs to me, I finally got it. And then I was finally able to teach other people. I forget what podcast episode that was, but that was one of my.
I think, yeah. So you're talking about the Transformers episode that he did.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll you keep talking. I'll find the episode number. That is one of our most popular episodes of all time.
But yeah, so in that tier one, table stakes or basic prompting, stuff like that. Becoming more expert will be understanding LLM's limitations, understanding the architecture, hallucination bias, understanding, garbage in, garbage out, data centric AI, data hygiene, cloud basics, and of course, AI awareness. And then the next step up from that, if you want to be an engineer and stuff like that and future proof, it's all about keeping current with the tools that are out there, like keeping current with what's going on with OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Google, building those systems, prompt engineering. And take, for example, prompt engineering. If that's the second level, I actually teach a class on that as well. But now we've got prompt programming, which is and prompt templates, which is a part of that as well. And that next tier is about learning to customize model workflows and definitely starting to work with domains and of course efficient engineering. So that's very important. But like Sadie, I think the next tier after that, because I'm kind of going in levels here, the next tier after that is definitely orchestration. So I can't wait to read her book because it's always been over decades, like new skills, new tools. It's always about, as you said at the very start, connecting those tools, wrapping them, integrating them into product workflow, putting them into production, and then managing latency and cost. You know that the paradox we talked about earlier, the not the productivity one, but anyway, I'll come back to it. But so when new things come out, I think it's called the automation paradox. Whenever something is automated, it's never, in the ether. There still has to be oversight and judgment applied to that, right? So orchestration, integration is very important. And then the expert level of that is, these multi-agent systems, tool chains, pipelining, and then continuous learning. And then after that, it comes into management. And I'm a big believer in this, you know, you really need to focus on those human-centered skills, right? Like when you're not stuck coding all day or AI is augmenting or automation a lot of your work, that communication, that collaboration, being adaptable, domain knowledge, whereas fintech, healthcare, finance, startups, health, law becomes so important. And then, building leadership around that. What's your AI strategy? Like what's your AI strategy? Understanding ethical judgment, what to do there, safety, auditing, compliance. I know a lot of people now going for AI risk compliance certificates, which I think is quite smart. And then I think the last thing to really future proof is you got to learn to learn. You got to stay very curious about this stuff, stay in the slipstream. You got to get comfortable navigating ambiguity. And I think a big part of that, if you want to become expert at, is developing foresight is really important in this field now. Anticipating what AI will enable, what are the next requirements going to be, system thinking, creativity, and understanding those responsibilities. Because to be honest, it's not that hard. That's what I've been doing most of my career. That's why I kept on shifting. That's why I got into data science earlier, and that's why I got into AI early. That's kind of why I got into VC, because I want to kind of have a window into what's next. And I got to say as well, even when I started ODSC and the meetups back in 2013 and ODSC in 2015, it's all about building your brand. Long gone are the days when you depend on one employer. John, I got to say, you were the master of building a brand, right? People can take a lesson out of your book. Build your own brand, do your work, write blog, post, learn, be curious. Skills right now they've got a shelf life or a half life of much less than what they were. Like, I spent decades honing my coding skills, and it's like loss aversion, right? You don't want to let go of those skills, but you gotta sunset some skills. And now I focus on being the best prompt engineer I can be, and less about coding. And when I teach my machine learning class and my coding class, I teach them the fundamentals of it, but I'm like, okay, now it's going to be about how to prompt this. So yeah, you got to sunset, because there's only so much time in the day, so you got to sunset some skills. And you have to be comfortable with learning new skills continuously.